Recently, the Marketeer Association had a fascinating presentation from Andy Sumner, who runs a company called Sumner Associates. Sumner is heavily involved in the £500 million Peel Holdings plan to build Media City. And of course, Media City's prime tenant is the BBC. Sumner's role in all this is to provide production expertise. In fact, they're going to be running the BBC facility. In this film, Andy talks us through how he will work for the BBC, and in fact how he is already working for the BBC, not only in terms of running a lot of their current productions, but also in terms of setting up a new facility on the Media City site called the Pie Factory. The Pie Factory is designed as a bit of a precursor for Media City to let the world know just what Media City will offer. Here's a film. I hope you enjoy it.
3 years ago, I was approached by a lady called Felicity Goody. I don't know if you know Felicity, but she's a kind of ball of fire, who basically, almost single-handedly, was responsible for getting the BBC to come to Salford Quays, or Manchester's waterfront, as I prefer to call it, rather than go to Manchester. So she called me about 3 years ago and said she had some people she wanted me to meet. I came over to her offices, Salford URC, and she said that she was she told me about this idea of getting the BBC to come to Salford. She introduced me to three guys from Peel Holdings, who were Paul Chappell's, Ed Burrows and Mike Butterworth. And if you kind of rearrange those surnames, you got BBC. So I thought, this is a good start. So I was kind of brought in because I was trusted by the BBC. I've been working for them. I've been running Sumner's for nearly 20 years now with my wife Janet, and everything that comes out of BBC Manchester that's made in BBC Manchester we post-produce. So we kind of, they film it and then it comes to us. So the BBC kind of trusted us and trusted the model that we'd kind of come up with in Manchester. And in our time, we've kind of seen off. BBC used to have their own BBC resources, in-house facilities. So we kind of Sumner's set up, and then they decided to close those, and they came up with this wizard idea of doing a partnership with Granada and called it 360 Media, and nobody wanted to use that either. I think one of the mistakes people make is that, certainly in my industry, I don't know your industry, my industry, it's all about relationships, and I don't have any contracts or anything with the BBC. I don't have one single contract with the BBC. I do £3 million of business with them. I don't have one contract. Basically, I have relationships, or Janet, my wife, has the relationships with the producers. So on a daily basis, she's kind of talking, certainly on a weekly basis, she talks to all those people, finds out the problems, finds out the issues, finds out what's coming along, and kind of sorts those problems out before their eyes. I think the BBC see that as a kind of model for Media City as well, interestingly. I mean, it's all about managed services now. I mean, at this moment in time, they did Pacific Quay, as we know, and Pacific Quay is a fantastic building, but it's still a BBC installation. It's a bit like White City in Glasgow, because it's still got BBC editors and BBC staff. The model for Media City is just managed services, and they will hire in what they need, and there's going to be sort of 7 high-definition studios. The BBC don't own those studios. It's interesting, there's a popular misconception that, and this is, I've had this from kind of Tory shadow ministers saying, well, it's a scandal, you know, the government are paying to bring the BBC to Manchester and it's shocking and it's costing us a lot of money. And they say, no. Peel Media is spending 500 million quid on this operation, and the NWDA are putting 50 million in. It's not costing the BBC anything. It will cost relocation fees, but it's not costing anything. And I think the BBC see this as the model for the future, because if, as many people suspect, the licence is top sliced and Channel 4 gets a slug of the money, they're not going to sort that out by saying, oh, well, we've got to get rid of another 15% of the staff or whatever. So the managed service model, I think they're kind of really wedded to, and then they see that as a way forward. I'm kind of digressing because I keep on talking about the Pie Factory, because 3 years ago these people said, we've got this, will you help us? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So I kind of joined the team, the Salford team, which was a bit bizarre because Sumner's is on Wicker Street West, which is right on the edge of where the BBC were going to move to if they'd have stayed in Manchester. But this was just a bigger site. I mean, it's 37 acres, the first bit, but it's a 200-acre site, and Peel were kind of, Peel are the sort of businesses, you know, with the Trafford Centre. They don't just build it and bugger off. They build it and manage it, and that's the model here. They're going to manage it. They're going to run it. You know, so I kind of figured this was much bigger and grander and the better option. So I kind of joined their team and was on the platform with them in the BBC saying, yeah, these people are, you know, don't worry about them. They're okay, really. We then went into this kind of process of the BBC were asking all sorts of daft questions like how much is it going to cost to make Blue Peter in 2011? Not an easy one, but I was the guy who kind of fielded the answers to those questions, and myself and a colleague, Brian Hardman, we came up with a sort of vision for connectivity. But because we worked so closely with the BBC, we kind of knew what they wanted anyway, so it was just kind of putting it on the and so Peel, we sent a draft document over to Peel, and that was cut and paste in the document, went over to the BBC. So we were sort of embroiled in that, and then in sort of May 2006, when it was really beginning to hot up, I got a call from the guys at Peel, and they said, we've got this building, and it's come into our hands. It's on the Media City site. We're not quite sure what to do with it, but they, in their travels, had been sort of gone to Pinewood and Shepperton, as well as looking at the BBC studios, and they'd seen the sort of the James Bond set. So they said, we've got this building. It's got some quite big areas. Do you think we could make some studios in it? So I came down and had a look. Now the Pie Factory, as I say, had gone into receivership in the January 2006. Well, it was January 2006, and it was very sad because when I first came to this building, these were these offices, and there were still Christmas decorations up, and this was kind of February, March, and they just closed it. They just pulled the plug. At the end, they were getting 3p a pie off the major supermarkets. This is for meat pies, and there's not a lot of profit in that, as I'm sure we can imagine. In fact, I did actually speak to a lady who worked in customer services, and she was telling me she got a letter from a dissatisfied customer saying that there wasn't much meat in his pie, and she wrote back to him and said, we don't like to contradict our customers, but I can assure you there's absolutely no meat in our pies. So the Pie Factory closed down, and they just walked out, switched the power off, so there were fridges, big massive fridges full of meat, just switched the power off. So sort of winter turned to summer, and this meat still stayed in these fridges, and Peel had said, will you run it? So I said, yeah, okay. So I then started to dive into my database, client base, and started to bring in people around and said, we're doing this. And very much we're kind of leaning back on the Sumner's reputation. You know, Sumner's as a business never closes, and we just kind of sort people's problems out. So Kenton Allen, who was the producer of a thing called The Visits, said to Janet, and I brought him round, and he said, will it be ready, Janet? Because it's very smelly. I said, yes, Kenton, it'll be fine. So I said, okay, we'll do the visit here. So in the sort of September 06, Peel said, right, we'll do it. And it's kind of, I know Peel do get some flack, but I mean, John Whittaker, I believe, has a vision, and this is part of his vision for Salford and this is a massive regeneration project. And it was September 06 when he said, yeah, okay, we'll do the Pie Factory. The BBC didn't sign up to Media City until May 2007. So he was kind of, this was his, okay, this was another marker in the, yeah, we're going to go for it. So between September and January, February, the young man here who's filming this lot is Dean, who kind of runs the Pie Factory. I think my job is to kind of, my job is more strategic. I kind of find out what's happening and bring it in. Dean kind of deals with them on a daily basis, and so and it's not that easy, is it, mate?
Not that easy, no.
But you kind of, it's about satisfying the clients. It's all about, Sumner's is as good as its last job, the Pie Factory is as good as its last job. And that fundamentally is why BBC Resources and 360 Media all failed, because you've got, when you're in a monopoly, you don't get it. And you know, you're making Coronation Street and you put it out, you sell the adverts and it's easy peasy. The staff never got it. So we said, okay, we'll do it, and we set off, and we in sort of 4 months we turned it around, and in